through legislation. But we have, as a country, entered into the arena in which I call fixation with the Constitution. Things that ought not to be in the Constitution are found in the Constitution.
Like what, for instance?
You find, for example, provisions relating to political parties. These are things that if you look at other constitutions in the so-called older democracy would not be there. Issues to deal with ethics, how we conduct ourselves. They are things that ought not to be in the Constitution. We have so much detail in our Constitution, and I can tell you why. The typical post-colonial African state is an artificial state. You have in a country like Kenya over 56 ethnicities. And in order to balance the interests which are undercurrent, sometimes you put in your typical constitution things that traditionally ought not to be in the constitution. And that is why we find ourselves going on to amend the constitution. I can give you many constitutions which are older than ours. Look at the Swiss constitution. It's a third of our constitution in size. Look at the American Constitution. It's perhaps almost 10% in size of our Constitution. Look at the Indian Constitution, and many of them. But typically, African constitutions tend to be very long in order to accommodate all these interests. And the prototypical constitution in that regard is the South African Constitution of 1994 and during that period. Look at the Ugandan Constitution of 1995, the Ethiopian Constitution. All these tend to belong, and we constitutionalize these things because our politics and governance is characterized by ethnic suspicion.
How is this a bad thing?
It is not neither bad nor good, because every country must, in the nature of things, do things that address their own specific situation. But as my teacher, Kotho Gendo, said many years ago, in 1972 to be exact, a constitution without constitutionalism means very little.
Explain that, please.
I can explain. You can have a good constitution, but if you don't practice what it prescribes, then it is useless. It can have beautiful words. And Yash Gai said it when we were making the constitution, that Africa is a graveyard of beautifully written constitutions which are honored in breach. Look at our own constitution. Look at them. Look at chapter 6, and I want you, without naming names, the individuals who are now in parliament, they could some of them could quite a good number of them should be in jail. Fact.
Yes.
But every time they tell us what to do, they tell us how to behave ethically. Are we giving meaning to chapter 6 of the Constitution? No. If you look at the Salaries Review Commission, they recommend to us what it is that should be paid to public servants. Do our members of parliament respect all those? No.
But Prof, don't you think that the very example you've given is probably what lends credence to the effectiveness of the Constitution in this sense? If people preach water and drink wine, which is in essence what our elected leaders tend to do when it comes to matters of morality, does it then not shine a very, very bright light as to the reality of what our morality is?
I hear you. We cannot, in the nature of things, surrender to a situation where we say that we normalize the absurd.
No, not normalize.
Yes, we should not do that.
Acknowledge it for what it is.
We acknowledge but don't normalize.
Yes.
And that is why we try to ensure that through a constitutional dispensation, we revolutionize what is undesirable. We have a country today where our creed is greed. Our creed is to do the right things. We have political bad manners, as I've said before. And we have had countries in this situation. Singapore, which we keep on talking about, was in this very situation until the administration of Lee Kuan Yew in the 1960s caused people to move in the right direction. 140 government officials arrested in a single day. Singapore has never been the same again. Paul Kagame in Rwanda, post-genocide, through a new constitutional dispensation, did this. In other words, if you have a good constitution and you have political leadership that is committed to ensuring that things ought to run in a proper way, then a good constitutional dispensation forms a foundation. As it is today, we have within the political class individuals who think they are bigger than the Constitution, who think that they can operate outside of the Constitution. And the time is now to rein them in and to have the courage to tell them, no matter how big you are no bigger than the law.
Constitution. I thought that's what we did in 2010.
Oh, so